Hello everyone, I'm back, and as I promised, I'm now posting the PowerPoint lecture and presentation for Chapter 2, Open versus Closed Systems. So again, what were the learning objectives for this chapter? Learning objective 1, define closed system models, scientific management, administrative management, and bureaucratic management. I know it's a lot, right? We went through it. Learning objective 2, define open system models. That's total quality management model and supply chain synergy model as well. Learning objective 3, describe how the environment is changing and the need for a learning organization. Learning objective 4, explain how the criminal justice system can become a learning organization. Look, I know the chapter is packed with quite a bit of information. I think that you'll find the article on pages 49 and 50 to be quite interesting. The case study on page 55 was interesting as well, wasn't it? I hope that you'll find the PowerPoint presentation to be helpful for you.
Did you know that 92% of the world's currency is digital and doesn't actually exist physically? This is just one example of how important new technology and the increasing digital world is being affected by humankind. For many of us, access to the internet, a reliable power grid, and the cars we drive are simple things that we find necessary for life as we know it. But we often fail to realize that most of these technologies are not produced or maintained in the United States. To discover how these things are made and developed, we must understand the basic idea of globalization. Globalization is defined as the process by which businesses or other organizations develop international influence or start operating on an international scale. Globalization is extremely important to the adoption of technology for many reasons, including price, availability, and continuous advancements. But we should also understand what technology even is. Technology is defined as the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes, especially in industry. As you can see, this is a very broad definition that can apply from anything from the internet to improved pencil sharpeners. Today I will be focusing on how the electronic technology that is rapidly changing our lives is being affected by globalization. The main aspect of electronic technology that is affected by globalization is price. Most cars that are available for purchase now have integrated Bluetooth, GPS, and touchscreens for our convenience. Computers and smartphones have become cheaper and cheaper, while being more powerful than ever. For example, the first smartphone was announced in 1992 at a price of $1,100. Named the IBM Simon, it was 8 inches tall, 1.5 inches thick, and over a pound in weight. Its biggest selling point was email access. When you look at what you can get now for $1,000 in a smartphone, you realize we have come a long way in a mere 26 years. Now, these improved and less expensive electronics have led to some products bordering on nonsense. Did you know that they make a bread basket that charges your phone for you? The list of the digitalization and increased adoption of such electronics goes on and on. As I stated earlier, the key to these products is price. The price of technology continues to decrease, making it viable to be put in more and more consumer products. This is simply a product of globalization. As factories and manufacturing facilities get moved all over the world, labor wages, raw material prices, and shipping rates all drop, making low-price electronics available. Without these options, our lives would be very different. Globalization also benefits technology by allowing greater availability of advanced technology everywhere. Again, price is a major factor in availability, but there are other elements that affect if products are available. As products are outsourced to other countries, they become popular in the countries they are made in. This is an obvious benefit of globalization because it is helping these countries, which are usually developing nations, become more advanced and is allowing them to become more connected with the rest of the world. This is a double win because, as previously stated, it benefits the producing countries, but also the country that the projects originated in, because the globalization opens new markets, yielding more profits for the original company. Another aspect of availability is many electronic products are not a standalone system. They are simply made to be put into another product instead of being used by themselves. So if an electronic is made in the same country as the product it will be placed into, that is much easier than exporting and importing from country to country. For example, it is much easier to put a touchscreen that is made in China into a car that is also made in China than taking the same touchscreen and having to export it to another country. The only problem with this effect is that it requires mass globalization of many products, not just electronics. Another major consequence that globalization has on technology is that with the increase in countries designing, building, and manufacturing these electronics, more knowledge and experience is gained when all this effort is combined. This is what could be described as community learning, for when a company makes an advancement, it can be shared with the rest of the world. Other companies can then branch or advance further on that technology than the original breakthrough. This happens continually, and when this is coupled with competition, it creates an environment that is highly conducive to advancements and breakthroughs. An example of this is the smartphone market. One company will introduce a new feature, and from then on, all other phone manufacturers following this release will also offer this feature. Then, other companies will continue it even further, and so on. This is the main reason electronics have advanced so quickly. So in summary, technology is affected in major ways by globalization. Price is the most obvious and arguably most important, but the availability and adoption of these technologies, along with the breakthroughs that globalization fuels, creates explosive changes, and it looks to be alluding to a bright future.
Hello there, buddy. With a little help from my animated friends, let's find out what organizational structure means. Now meet Nancy. She's the Chief Executive Officer, or CEO, of Awesome Corp, a company with 35 employees. Well, this is Jim. He's the Chief Operating Officer, or COO, of Awesome Corp. He's Nancy's second in command and reports directly to her. Jim oversees a wide variety of areas, including production, sales, and marketing. Mutlu is the Chief Financial Officer, or CFO. Simply put, he's responsible for the financial health of the company. Nancy, Jim, and Mutlu are Awesome Corp's executive team. But Awesome Corp has more employees than just 3. A lot more. Let's take a look at the financial department. And as you remember, Mutlu is the CFO. Now this is his team. Layla is a senior receivables accountant. She manages accounts receivables. That's the money coming into the company from its customers. She makes sure invoices get issued and that Awesome Corp gets paid on time. Well, this is Thomas. He's Layla's peer. meaning that they are likely to receive comparable compensation, and they both report to Mutlu. Thomas's area is slightly different though. Thomas handles accounts payable. That's the money that the company pays to its suppliers and service providers. He also happens to handle the company's taxes. Susan is a procurement specialist. She works with the company's suppliers and partners to make sure the company always has sufficient resources and that service contracts are up to date. She frequently scouts new vendors in order for Awesome Corp to get the best prices. And Thomas is her manager. Ahoy, Financial Department! Of course, there are more departments. Together, all these employees from Awesome Corp, decision-making power flows from the top to the bottom, with a greater concentration at the top. All companies are slightly different, but this will give you a solid start. For practice, try sketching out an organizational structure of your company or college. Good luck!
Systems theory treats an organization as a system. A system can be either closed or open, but most approaches treat an organization as an open system. An open system interacts with its environment by way of inputs, throughputs, and outputs. In order to understand the theory, you must first get a firm understanding of a system. A system is any set of distinct parts that interact to form a complex whole. Think of the universe. Its parts are as small as a subatomic particle and as large as galactic clusters. Each part is distinct but interacts to form the universe. An organization is also a system with parts such as employees, assets, products, resources, and information that form a complex system. As we noted in our definition, systems can be open or closed. A closed system is not affected by its environment. For example, a chuck of iron ore is not substantially affected by its environment. An open system is a system that is affected by its environment. A simple example is a living organism such as an animal. Most theorists treat an organization as an open system. An open system consists of three essential elements. An organization receives resources, such as equipment, natural resources, and the work of employees, referred to as inputs. The inputs are transformed, called throughputs, and then yield products or services, called outputs. Outputs are released into the environment. Feedback loops are also an important feature of open systems. They provide information to the organization by connecting the outputs to the inputs. A negative feedback loop indicates a problem that should be corrected. For example, the failure of a product design indicated by the need to recall the product. A positive feedback loop can identify outputs that have worked well. For example, a successful marketing campaign that yields high sales. Thus, feedback loops are a means of confirming success or signaling that corrections to the systems need to be made. Finally, the role of management in an open system should be fairly clear. First, you need to manage the inputs into the organization, such as capital, natural resources, equipment, and employees. Second, you must monitor the throughputs, the use of the inputs for the creation of goods or services. Third, you need to manage the outputs into the environment, the goods and services. Finally, you must monitor for positive and negative feedback loops and make changes necessary to alleviate any negative ones. Systems theory is one of the dominant organizational theories.
Today we're going to look at how we can see organizations as systems. Ludwig von Bertalanffy and J.G. Miller established the foundations of general systems theory in the 1960s and 70s, and researchers in the organizational studies area imported the systems metaphor of the living biological organism and the key terms that go along with it to pursue a richer understanding of how organizations worked. In 1966, for example, Daniel Katz and Robert Kahn published The Social Psychology of Organizations that applied systems theory's concepts to organizational life. I think it's most helpful to see systems as an alternative perspective at the time. Classical management era of organizational studies was really the dominant view, and it saw organizations as machines, and that was the main way to view life in organizations for many decades. The goal of that classical management school of thought was they wanted efficiency, productivity, and control. They were looking for the one right way, or as Frederick Taylor said, the one best way to do every single task in the organization. And so when systems theory came along, it was really a whole nother way to view life at work. A systems approach looks at the whole organism, not the little pieces of the machine, but how it all fits together as a whole. So the goal of the systems approach is to describe and explain how organizations work. They don't have a control mindset. And they wanted to pursue multiple ways to accomplish the various goals of the organization. They're not looking for the one right way. So I think it's best to understand the systems approach as a counterpoint or an alternative or even a reaction against the classical management era and school of thought. So in an organization, we have three main parts. We have a set of inputs where we have resources, information that is needed to supply the organizational system. We also have the processes or throughputs. That's all the activity within the system that we need to do to accomplish work. And then we have the outputs. Those are the outcomes, the products, the services created or delivered by the organization. Typical pizza place, for example, has inputs that you might expect. The people that are doing the work, the food, the ovens, refrigerator, pizza boxes, and all the other materials. And then you have your processes or throughputs where you make the dough, you cut the vegetables, mix the sauce, answer the phones, take the orders, make the pizza, delegate the tasks, lots of work in a pizza place. And then you have outputs, which are hopefully pizza delivered to happy customers. You have a profit for the shop. Hopefully your employees are getting good paychecks. You put the trash in the dumpster and all the other kinds of waste material. Those are also considered outputs of a system. And those are the three main parts. So systems here are clearly open. That's one of the main concepts in systems theory. They're open to their environment. And when we say environment, we don't just mean things like the weather. Of course, we're not excluding that weather, but the environment more broadly. So you have permeable boundaries where information comes in and out. Resources flow both in and out of those boundaries around the organization. And you have an exchange with the environment that's not just happening, but it's essential for the health of the system. So constantly things are coming in and moving out of the system to keep it healthy, to keep it functioning properly. And your environments that you're in are very unpredictable. You can't say for certain exactly what's going to happen with competitors and exactly what's going to happen in the future. So you have the leaders that are scanning the environment. They're called boundary spanners, and they're looking at the environment to see what the vendors are up to, what the customers are looking to do, what the competition is up to, where the general economy is headed. And they're keeping an eye through environmental scanning on all of the things that are happening in and around the organization to make better decisions. Holism is an important part of the systems approach, where systems are viewed as a whole, not simply as a collection of separate pieces. So you wouldn't view yourself, your whole body, as just a collection of cells. You're much more than that. Another way to say it is a system is greater than the sum of its parts. Some people use the term synergy here, which has a bad rap in some circles. Those parts of the system are interdependent, and they interact through mutual feedback processes. So feedback is a dynamic process where the pieces of the system of that whole are all interconnected. Interdependence is another leading concept in this systems approach, where organizations are in a dynamic and interconnected relationship with their environment. For example, there are subparts within the system that are also interrelated. They're not isolated. The organization is not simply isolated and plopped down in the community. It's connected to that community, and the pieces, the parts within that organization are also interconnected. They're made up of interconnected subsystems. So you have a whole organization, and then you have, let's say, some major departments within that organization, and then within those departments you have work teams that are also interrelated and overlapping. So changes to one part of the system directly or indirectly influence other parts. For example, if you had some people call in sick on one team, then other people in the organization would be at least indirectly affected and have to maybe pick up some of that work. Maybe you hire a whole bunch of people in one part of the organization, and everybody's going to have to get on board and train them and adapt when you add people. So everything is interconnected. All the parts either directly or indirectly influence the other parts. Systems also have goals, but the goals, again, are not like classical management goals of finding the one best way. Goals are contingent and negotiated.
Task performance in organizational behavior includes employee behavior that are directly involved in the transformation of organizational resources into the goods or services that the organization produces. In other words, task performance is the set of explicit obligations that an employee must fulfill to receive compensation and continued employment. For example, an accountant, the task performance involves preparing, examining, and analyzing accounting records for accuracy and completeness. For an advertising executive, task performance includes developing advertising campaigns and preparing and delivering presentations to clients. Basically, most of the part in a job description includes content that is related to task performance. Job satisfaction in organizational behavior refers to how well a job provides fulfillment of a need or want, or how well it serves as a source of means of enjoyment. Job satisfaction is the degree to which individuals feel positively or negatively about their jobs. It can be influenced by a person's ability to complete required tasks, the level of communication in an organization, and the way management treats employees. Measuring job satisfaction can be challenging, as the definition of satisfaction can be different for different people. If an organization is concerned about employee job satisfaction, management may conduct surveys to determine what type of strategies to implement. This approach helps management define job satisfaction objectively. Superior-subordinate communication, or the relationship between supervisors and their direct reporters, is another important influence on job satisfaction in the workplace. Therefore, it is a very key and vital factor when it comes to task performance. In organizational behavior, organizational commitment is the individual's psychological attachment to the organization. The basis behind many of these studies was to find ways to improve how workers feel about their job so that these workers would become more committed to their organizations. Organizational commitment predicts work variables such as turnover, organizational citizenship, behavior, and job performances. Some of the factors such as role stress in empowerment, job security and employability, and distribution of leadership have been shown to be connected to a worker's sense of organizational commitment. A prominent theory in organizational commitment is the three-component model, which includes effective commitment, continuous commitment, and lastly, normative commitment. Keep in mind that your commitment is not based on just one of these components. Employee engagement is a workplace approach resulting in the right conditions for all members of an organization to give of their best each day, committed to their organization's goals and values, motivated to contribute to organizational success with an enhanced sense of their own well-being. Employee engagement is a person's passion and involvement in the job. Highly engaged employees have a passion for work and feel a deep connection to their company. For those who are high engagement employees, had higher levels of customer satisfaction, are more productive, brought in higher profits, and experienced lower levels of turnover and accidents than other companies. It is a positive attitude held by the employee towards the organization and its values. Its focus is on work performed at the job and represent the willingness to dedicate physical, cognitive, and emotional resources to the work. People who have high employee engagement will be more vigilant and more focused on the work or task, therefore making it a key positive trait to task performance.
In the first decades of the century, America was speeding up. Photography not only documented America's growing industrial might, it was put to work as a tool of the modern assembly line. In this speeded-up world, factory owners looked to the camera to make their workers move even faster.
Frank Bunker Gilbreth took his first step into the field of management in 1885 when on his second day as an apprentice bricklayer, he questioned why he was being taught several different methods for laying bricks. His interest in finding the best method led to his development of motion and fatigue study.
Early in the century, Frank Gilbreth used photographs to break a worker's every action into the smallest units, revealing every unnecessary movement. He studied the fastest workers in order to teach maximum efficiency to everyone. In Gilbreth's cyclograph technique, he attached flashing lights to a worker's fingers to indicate the length of time a motion would take. Soon Gilbreth's photographs were changing the lives of everyone from golfers to oyster shuckers. Gilbreth observed that surgeons took more time looking for their instruments than they did in performing the operation itself. He suggested a new procedure. Keeping an eye on the incision, the surgeon would extend an open palm to the nurse and utter the now famous words, "Scalpel, please." Some accused Gilbreth of turning skilled workers into robots, but the bosses loved his techniques. Gilbreth even brought his zeal for efficiency to his own large family. His children got their revenge when they wrote about home life with their eccentric father and called it cheaper by the dozen. Gilbreth died of a heart attack at age 55.
Grandparent of organizational studies. We're going to look at the context
The field of scientific management developed quickly in the United States between 1895 and 1920 and focused on improving the efficiency of manufacturing facilities and their workers. About the same time, equally important ideas about bureaucratic and administrative management were developing in Europe. Henry Fayle, an experienced French CEO, published his ideas about how and what managers should do in their jobs, known as administrative management, in General and Industrial Management of 1916. Though his work was not translated and widely recognized in the United States until 1949, Frenchman Henry Fayle was an important contributor to the field of management as Taylor was. Like Taylor and the Gilbreths, Fayle's work experience significantly shaped his thoughts and ideas about management. But whereas Taylor's ideas changed companies from the shop floor up, Fayle's ideas were shaped by his experiences as a managing director or CEO and generally changed companies from the board of directors down. Fayle is best known for developing 5 functions of managers and 14 principles of management, as well as for his belief that management can and should be taught to others. The most formative events of Fayle's business career came during his years as managing director of an integrative steel company that owned several coal and iron ore mines and employed 10,000 to 13,000 workers. Fayle argued that managers needed to perform 5 managerial functions if they were to be successful: planning, organizing, coordinating, commanding, and controlling. Because most management textbooks have dropped the coordinating function and now refer to Fayle's commanding function as leading, these functions are widely known as planning, determining an organization's goals and a means for achieving them; organizing, deciding where decisions will be made and who will do what jobs and what tasks; leading, inspiring and motivating others to work hard and achieve organizational goals; and controlling, monitoring progress towards goal achievement and taking corrective action when needed. In addition, according to Fail, effective management is based on 14 principles. Let's take a look. Increase production by dividing work so that workers complete smaller tasks or job elements. A manager's authority, which is the right to give orders, should be commensurate with the manager's responsibility. Clearly defined rules and procedures are needed at all organizational levels to ensure order and proper behavior. To avoid confusion and conflict, each employee should report to and receive orders from just one boss. One person and one plan should be used in deciding the activities to be carried out to accomplish each organizational objective. Employees must put the organization's interest and goals before their own. Compensation should be fair and satisfactory to both the employees and the organization. That is, don't overpay or underpay employees. Avoid too much centralization or decentralization. Strike a balance depending on the circumstances and employees involved. From the top to the bottom of an organization, each position is part of a vertical chain of authority in which each worker reports to just one boss. To avoid confusion and conflict, order can be obtained by having a place for everyone and having everyone in his or her place. In other words, there should be no overlapping responsibilities. Equity. Kind, fair, and just treatment for all will develop devotion and loyalty. This does not exclude discipline if warranted and consideration of the broader general interests of the organization. Stability. Low turnover, meaning a stable workforce with high tenure, benefits an organization by improving performance, lowering costs, and giving employees, especially managers, time to learn their jobs. Because it's a great source of strength for businesses, managers should encourage the development of initiative or the ability to develop and implement a plan in others. Develop a strong sense of morale and unity among workers that encourages coordination of efforts. Administrative management is an important part of the management history.
Henry Fayol, or Henri in the French, is a big name in the classical management area of organizational studies, the administrative science area. In 1949, his book was published in English, General and Industrial Management. Fayol was a French engineer by training, and when he looked around at the tail end of the Industrial Revolution, he saw a great need for a systematic approach to train managers. He saw these large organizations, and they needed managers with high levels of managerial competence. So he offered his perspective to get the conversation going. He wrote in his book, "It is a case of setting it going, starting general discussion. That is what I am trying to do by publishing this survey, and I hope a management theory will emanate from it." And it certainly did. And if at times, by the way, when you're reading this book and listening to this lesson, you feel like these terms all start to sound the same and even overlap a little bit, you probably wouldn't be the first person to say that. So he's laying it down, but his book is by no means meant to be the end of the discussion, just the beginning. So we're going to sort through the activities of industry that he explains in his book, the managerial activities or functions, and then the general principles of management. Fayol saw 6 activities of industry. These are the general or overarching activities it takes to run an organization. First is the technical, that means the production and the manufacturing concerns. Second, commercial, that's the buying and the selling and exchanging of goods and services. Third, financial, that's where you search for and use capital or money optimally. Fourth, security, that's the protection of property and people. 5, accounting, that's the balance sheets, the costs, and keeping track of all that. And 6, which was his real area of concern, was the managerial activity. That means the planning, organizing, command, coordination, and control. When Fayol looked at the overall organization's hierarchy, he saw that these activities played out in different proportions depending upon where you were. For example, at the very bottom of the organization, you had what he called the workmen. And they didn't need much managerial knowledge because they didn't do that much, but they needed a lot of technical knowledge in addition to some security concerns and accounting knowledge to keep track of things. Somewhere in the middle of the organizational hierarchy, you had the head of the shop. Today would this probably be like the head of a department or a middle-level manager. And this person obviously needed more managerial knowledge and competence than a frontline worker, a little less technical, but they also needed to be concerned with things like the financial side, the security side, and accounting side. So you can see here that the managerial activity is expanding as we move up the hierarchy, and some of the other areas are shrinking a little bit. By the time you got up to the top dog, he called it the manager, nowadays we might say the president or CEO, this person was doing a lot. The lion's share was managerial activity. They needed other knowledge as well, though. They needed to be involved in technical, commercial, financial, security, and accounting, but in lower levels proportional to the managerial responsibilities. And this is where Fayol saw the gap. He saw very little training that was systematic. They would train people up in how to become better managers. And Fayol broke these management activities, this managerial competence, down into 5 main areas that we will look at. And this is a list you're going to see in a lot of textbooks. The first is planning. Managers needed to look ahead and chart a course for the organization. They also needed organizational skills. They needed to select and arrange people in the best way possible. They needed to be in command. That meant they were overseeing things. They needed to lead and then stay out of the details. They needed that big picture point of view. Coordination was another important responsibility. They needed to harmonize and facilitate the work between and among the different departments in their organization. They also had to maintain control. They were to ensure compliance on all those other areas like accounting, finance, technical, and quality control. These management activities get at the big picture ways that managers were going to be spending their time. Fayol also outlined the principles of management, and we would normally see this in a textbook in a list of 14 items, and this had to do with a little bit more of the microscopic level, like what did management look like day to day? And there were no hard and fast rules. He considered these principles that were not meant to be rigid, they were meant to be flexible depending upon the situation that the manager faced. The first is division of work. That's the task specialization. This is meant to increase productivity, where each person got a very small task and they got good at it. The second is authority and responsibility. In other words, the manager has the right to give orders and exact obedience. That's part of being a manager. The third is discipline. That meant obedience, application, and energy on the part of the individual employee. And then the manager would warn, they would fine, and they would suspend people to enforce that discipline. Fourth, managers should pursue unity of command. In other words, an employee should receive orders from one supervisor only. I know that I used to be really confused in organizations when I worked in places where I felt like I had more than one boss, and it was really stressful. Number 5, unity of direction. That meant one head and one plan for a group of activities having the same direction. So everybody is pushing in the same direction. Number 6 is subordination of individual interest to general interest. That meant that you as an individual employee should put your personal interests aside and pursue the greater purpose. Number 7 is the remuneration of personnel. He thought people should be paid fairly and rewarded for what he called well-directed effort. In other words, if people are good workers, you should pay them fairly. Number 8 is centralization. Fayol believed that it was up to the manager to figure out the right balance of that centralized decision-making versus decentralized or delegated decision-making and power. If an organization is really big, they're going to have to decentralize a little bit more, but if it's smaller, then they can keep most of the decision-making power. And it was up to the managers to figure that out in any given case. Number 9 is the scalar chain. We call it the chain of command. He called it the chain of superiors, where you would go up the chain and then cut across the organization somewhere and then down the chain of command to speak to somebody on the other side. Of course, Fayol believed in many cases it would be much more efficient to let people talk directly, and so as long as they're okay with the supervisors, he said that they could do that. Number 10 is order. That meant the right man in the right place. Of course, they all use the word man instead of people, to form an effective social order. So you had to put people in the right place to get the best out of everybody. Number 11 is equity. He had a desire for equity and the equality of treatment when dealing with people. He saw this as the right combination of kindliness and justice. Number 12, he believed in the stability of tenure and personnel. He wanted people to stay in their jobs when they were good at their jobs. He thought that was good for the organization. Number 13, initiative. Managers should encourage and inspire the initiative of employees. In other words, if you have a lot of lazy people hanging around, it partly is the manager's responsibility to make sure they're inspired and are taking initiative. And 14, esprit de corps. He wanted to establish unity and harmony in organizations, and he saw that as the manager's job. So like I mentioned, Fayol's book has a lot of lists in it, a lot of categories, and really that was his goal. It doesn't read like a narrative, like a well-developed story. It reads like a beginning. He's laying a foundation for others to build on, which they did. We talked about the first activities of industry. That's the mixture of different activities it takes to run an overall organization. We talked about second, the managerial activities or the functions. That's the list of 5. And finally, the general principles of management, or the 14 areas where the manager will approach people and try to move everybody in the right direction.
If you talk to someone that has recently moved, started a new job, or retired, and ask them what they miss most about their past situation, one of the most common answers is that they miss the people that were in their life. What that actually means is that they miss the social connections or relationships that they had with those people. Social connections or social interactions with other individuals is crucial to mental health, which in turn is crucial to overall health. The lack of social connections has shown to increase stress hormones, weaken the immune system, and lessen cardiovascular functions. People who are lonely tend to consume more alcohol, exercise less, have less quality sleep, and fatigue easily. Social relationships allow you to share your achievements and have support when times are tough. Imagine achieving a long-term goal you had. What's the first thing you want to do? Tell someone, of course. Or imagine if something terrible happens. Not having someone to lean on and talk to can make that event linger and make you feel even more isolated. Giving support in relationships can actually be more beneficial than receiving support. When someone shares something positive in their life with you, it's a compliment. They wanted you to be a part of their success, and they know that you have a sincere interest in their life. And when someone shares a tragedy in their life, you know they really trust you, and they're looking to you to help them through this difficult time. Now, some social relationships can be bad. A person that is constantly negative and has a poor outlook can bring you down and cause stress, making that relationship toxic. Someone that always talks about themselves and makes all of your interactions about them, well, that's not really a social connection. In that case, you're just an audience member in their one-person show on how wonderful their life is. Poor marital or poor relationship quality can also weaken the immune system and erode physical health. Dealing with stress from a poor relationship can lead to over-consuming food or alcohol, smoking, or taking medications to deal with the stress, which in turn can damage systems in the body. Connections through social media can be beneficial by allowing you to stay in touch with friends and family. However, social media connections are not a good alternative for face-to-face in-person contact, and too much time spent on social media can lead to more isolation and a greater feeling of loneliness. It's a good practice to use social media in moderation. To be healthy, we need people in our lives. It doesn't need to be 5,000 Facebook friends, and we don't have to have everyone like us. Having strong social relationships with just a few people is fine. A few people that we can share life's good and bad moments with, a few people that we can connect with on a regular basis with no stress and no judgments. A few people who accept us for who we are. Surround yourself with good people, folks.
The Hawthorne effect is the tendency we have to perform better when we know somebody is studying us. For example, a 2015 study of hospital staff hand washing found that staff were almost 3 times more likely to wash their hands when they knew they were being studied. The term Hawthorne effect comes from an experiment conducted at a US factory run by General Electric in Hawthorne near Chicago during the 1920s into factors that affected productivity. Everything worked. Increasing the illumination of the factory boosted productivity. Dimming the lights boosted productivity. Introducing rest pauses also worked. So did small group incentives. Oddly, after a positive change, returning to previous work conditions was also met with positive results. One popular interpretation of these results is that the novelty of being observed leads humans to perform tasks better. When we feel we're being studied, we improve our behaviour. While the experiment has been described as a glorified anecdote and it certainly falls well short of modern social science, it gives rise to this famous Hawthorne effect. Modern studies have confirmed the presence of this effect in a range of scenarios. For example, when teachers are observed in classrooms, they can exhibit better teaching behaviours than when left to their own devices. In my own work, I've had participants literally say, "I was going to do A, but I knew you were coming in, so I did B." While this can be a cause of frustration for researchers, it has implications for teachers. When students know they're being studied and valued, their performance improves. It also means that professional practice projects in schools, whatever they may be, will usually result in improved teaching outcomes. So, get into teams, observe each other, it'll almost certainly work. When humans know they're being studied, their performance usually improves. That is the Hawthorne effect.
Welcome to Straight to the Point. What is the voice of the customer? The voice of the customer, often abbreviated as VOC, describes the wants and expectations of your specific customer base. The VOC is considered a very critical part as well of process design, as we want to be considering our customers' needs at every single step of the process. It's also worth noting that the voice of the customer has become more and more popular over the last few years. One of the reasons that could be is because as a marketplace has fewer and fewer competitors within it that can differentiate their products or services, the level of their customer service and how well they meet the voice of the customer is what really differentiates them. So if I could go to either company A or B and buy a similar good or a similar service from them, the one differentiator that helps influence me from which company I do make that purchase from will ultimately be how well they meet the voice of the customer. To understand the voice of the customer really means we need to understand what our customers want, and not what we believe they want. This could be a make or break for some companies as they misunderstand what their customers are actually trying to tell them. The way an organization can understand the VOC is by reaching out to their customers and trying to understand them better through either surveys, focus groups, or other means. It's also interesting to note, in terms of process design, we only need to meet the requirements of our customers. We don't want to under-deliver, of course, but at the same time, we don't have to over-deliver. What we want to be able to do is to meet the requirements as best as we can and ensure that it's consistently over time meeting our customers' needs. What we're trying to avoid is to provide a service or product to a customer that only meets their needs for a given period of time, because what will happen is once that product or service no longer meets their needs, they will return back to the marketplace. And when they return back to the marketplace, it can become that much more difficult to reacquire if they were already dissatisfied with us. It's also important to note that the voice of the customer is becoming more important due to social networking. Now with social networking becoming more popular on the internet, customers from all around the world have the ability to provide their reviews online.
To identify areas for improvement, no matter how small.
The supply chain of North America depends on an efficient railway infrastructure. We keep trains moving, we protect that infrastructure, and we also, in doing so, enforce the law. Canadian Pacific Police Service operate in 4 time zones in 2 countries, 6 Canadian provinces and 14 US states. The CPPS have a control centre which is based in Winnipeg, Manitoba. That control centre controls all the resources, right from Philadelphia all the way to Vancouver in British Columbia. We deploy our resources in line with what we perceive to be the risk. We look at volumes of train traffic, the type of traffic that's occurring, and also then what sort of crimes, what sort of problems are we seeing on the railroad. We also align our resources with the national interest to protect the security of North America and also the supply chain security of the country.
The Canadian Pacific Police Service is involved with a variety of different enforcement functions, from trespass enforcement through traffic enforcement. And we also work with local law enforcement agencies and partner agencies to provide rail-related expertise.
The activities of the Canadian Pacific Police Service members is critical both to rail operations and public safety. We're that linchpin between the two.
Canadian Pacific Police Services assist with Canadian Pacific operations by responding to incident response in a prompt and efficient manner, allowing us to restore safety to our road in an efficient manner.
Our primary mission is exactly the same as every other police agency in North America. It's about public safety. The difference is that we deliver public safety within the context of a railroad environment. Some of our members police in areas that are very remote, where they have limited support. This means that they have to approach situations differently. They have to be very mindful of their own personal safety at all times.
In rural areas, they often have fewer members and longer distances to travel.
Our members who work in downtown areas like downtown Chicago have different challenges. Gang violence is something that we don't face often in the mountains, but it's something that is very real to city officers. Our members have to be very mindful of the situations they're getting into.
Hi everybody, my name is Martin McNichol, CEO of Gurus, and today I will answer the question, what is an ERP? So ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, and as per Wikipedia, it is a management software that integrates core business processes of a company. So what does that mean? I mean, your company is all these departments or functions, right? Think about finance, marketing, sales, professional services automation or service delivery, warehouse and inventory management, shipping, payment, e-commerce. Now you have to do product planning, purchasing, even manufacturing.
Police
Drones are helping local law enforcement step into the future.
They are giving crime fighters a fresh perspective and leaving guys nowhere to hide. Drone 8 has Peter Bernard in the viewfinder for us now to tell us more about how this new tool is really helping keep all of us safe. Right, Peter?
Yes, they are. Hello there, Keith and Stacy. Drone 8 is flying over our Tampa studios right now, and it's a live picture from our drone. You can see it there. As he gives us an aerial tour of what's around here, I will tell you that more and more law enforcement are using drones in their operation. They're putting them in the air because they're fast, nimble, and can see things you can't see from the ground.
Well, that's it. And I'll see you in class.